Hello and welcome into the Week 4 edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. I'm Clint Buckley, and as always, I'm joined by Chandler Vessels. It seems like the season just began a few days ago, yet here we are 3 weeks in, and district play is going to start for some teams this week or next week with those 8-team districts. They'll get starting next week. I can't believe we're already 3 weeks in.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's been a month almost. I mean, it feels like just last week I was at the Longview-Lufkin game to start out the season, so we're really starting to get a good feel for what teams look like, and it's getting pretty exciting.
Yeah, in that vein, before we get into this week's games, I think it's time to take notice of some of the early season surprises and disappointments, and see maybe if we can hammer down if this is just a trend or if this is going to stick around for the rest of the season. We'll start off with some of the surprising 3-0 teams. I guess number one on that list has to be Hallsville. Mm-hmm. They were 1-9 a season ago. They've won their first 3 games. They have wins over Terrell, Kilgore, and Bullard. Now, none of those teams, have got off to a great start either.
Yeah.
So don't really know what to make of those 3 wins. But they have a bye week this week, and then they start district play next week, and 9-5A Division II. I think aside from Marshall and White House, I think you'd have to say the rest of that district is kind of up in the air.
Yeah. I mean, and Joe Drennan's in his second year there at Hallsville. He took Mineola to a state championship. I mean, I feel like this team is at the very least going to compete for a playoff spot in that district. They might not be this good for the rest of the year. They might not continue at this pace, but I feel like Hallsville, and just based on the experience that he has, is in a pretty good spot, not only this year, but going forward, too.
Yeah, and they have some good seniors on that team, led by Blake Traynor, their offensive lineman, who's committed to Texas A&M. And how about Tristan Driggers? Last week was just nuts in their big win over Bullard. He scored 4 touchdowns on offense. He returned a punt for a touchdown. And then also on defense, he forced 2 turnovers. So if that's not getting the job done, I don't know what is. So Hallsville's off to a 3-0 start. I expect them to contend for a playoff spot in that district. I don't think that they're quite on par with Marshall and White House, as I said earlier, but I think that they have just as good a shot as anybody else in that district of making the playoffs. So that's a team that's caught our eye for sure. Next is Gladewater.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bears are for real. But we'll find out this week. They're playing Pleasant Grove, so just based on what happens in that game, we'll have a better idea of just exactly where they stand. But I mean, we kind of talked about they had that big win against Spring Hill in week 1, and we're like, wow, they put up like 60 points on Spring Hill, but it's Spring Hill. Is no disrespect to Spring Hill, but they're not exactly a juggernaut or anything like that. And then they beat Atlanta, and we started to be like, okay, maybe Gladewater is for real. Atlanta right now is 0-3 though, so I'm not sure if that's as big of a win as we thought, but they've been putting up big numbers. Gladewater has. They've putting up 48 points a game. Their offense is sort of headlined by Eli Carter, the second leading rusher so far in East Texas. He's got like 762 yards so far.
3 games.
Yeah, and that's on 67 carries. So in case you're wondering, that's an average of 11 yards per carry. So
not too shabby, Mr. Carter.
Yeah, automatic first down. So I mean, I'm really excited to see how they do against Pleasant Grove. I'm not predicting a victory by any means for Gladewater, but if they can hang around with Pleasant Grove, the defending state champion, that'll show exactly where they are. And they've got a pretty tough district too with West Rusk. So
yeah, and that's another thing we didn't hit on right there is they're dropping down to 3A.
Yeah,
they were 2-8 in 4A Division II last year, and you could kind of tell that they were just kind of out of their league, quite literally, I guess. Last year playing against some bigger schools, they dropped down. They're still playing. I mean, Spring Hill and Center, they're both 4A teams. Yeah. Atlanta was in their district last year, so they're just a year removed from 482 as well. So I mean, maybe Gladewater would be competing at the 4A Division II level this year, but the fact that they're in 3A makes you wonder about the Bears' chances beyond just the regular season. So we'll keep an eye on Gladewater for the rest of the year for sure.
Yeah.
Another big team, or another team off to a big start, is Alto, 3-0, and they're doing that under first-year head coach Ricky Joe Meeks, who's the son of legendary East Texas football coach Dickie Meeks, who's won a couple of state championships at at 2 different stops in the area. But Alto was 4-7 last year, which is very disappointing for a proud program like Alto, who's won a couple of state titles themselves in the last decade or so. So to see them struggle was kind of a shock. And then we didn't know quite what to expect from Alto this year with the new coach, but whatever he's doing seems to be working. They're off to a 3-0 start. They have wins, impressive wins, at least the last 2 weeks. They opened with a win over Palestine Westwood, which is a below average 3A opponent, but they beat Timpson, which was a regional finalist in 2A Division II last year, and then they beat New Diana last week, which made it all the way to the regional finals in 3A Division II. So now New Diana is 0-3 this year. They've lost a lot from last year's group. Don't know exactly how good New Diana is going to be by the end of the season, but nonetheless, Alto is 3-0, and they're looking very good. They've slowly climbed up our top 10 in Class 2A. I believe they're up to number 3 this week. So Alto is definitely caught my attention, and they're definitely going to be a team to watch in that district. I believe they're in there with Carlisle. Mm-hmm. So that could be entertaining when those two teams face off against one another in a few weeks. Now on to the disappointing aspect of the program and the 0-3 starts, and I guess we've talked a little bit about them already so far on the show, but Kilgore off to an 0-3 start.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most surprising things so far this season. Kilgore went 3 rounds deep in the playoffs last year. They had 9 wins and
almost beat Henderson, or they would have been in the regional final game against Carthage.
Yeah, so they did lose their quarterback at the beginning of the year. He got kicked off the team for disciplinary reasons, but and their offense has sort of shown that they're only averaging like 19 points a game right now. So maybe they're struggling a little bit there, but even so, you would think that they would have gotten off to a better than an 0-3 start.
Right.
And they've played 5A teams, I think. They played Nacogdoches, they played Pine Tree.
Hallsville.
And Hallsville. Yeah, Hallsville, one of those other teams we were talking about that has gotten off to a good start. So maybe it's just they're playing up to the competition, but it's a little shocking.
Yeah, I agree, and it doesn't get any easier for them this week. They play Texas High on the road.
Yeah. Pittsburgh after that.
Yeah, Pittsburgh after that, and then they in that Murderers Row district with Carthage, Van, and Henderson. So it's not going to get much easier for Kilgore. I think there's a chance that they can still get into the playoffs because Chapel Hill's 0-3. They've been one of the least impressive teams in the area so far. Palestine also has struggled in the early going. So I think Kilgore can eventually right the ship and get into the playoffs and secure one of those 4 spots out of that district. But 0-3 is not an ideal way to start any season. So Kilgore definitely has some work to do. Another team that's off to an 0-3 start that is kind of surprising is Rusk. They lost 3 games all of last season. They were 9-3. They reached the area round of the playoffs, lost a shootout with Melissa, who was a regional finalist, I believe, from last year. Rusk is a regional semifinalist, I believe Melissa was. I can't remember which it was, but they went deep in the playoffs. That's the point. Rusk off to an 0-3 start, and it's kind of a head scratcher because they had several players back from last year's team. Their coach was back. They'd had some instability in their program among head coaches the last few years. To have their coaching staff return intact, and then the players that did such a great job for them last year coming back. It's kind of surprising that they're in this spot at 0-3 right now. But I will say this: their losses to Fairfield, Athens, and Palestine, while surprising, have come by a total of just 12 points.
Yeah.
So it could just be a matter of them not being able to finish in the fourth quarter. Which the more you play, and the more games you play, and the deeper the season goes, the more adept you become at building up your stamina, endurance, and you might be able to finish some of those games. So I'm not totally punching the panic button on Rusk. It's just surprising that they're off to an 0-3 start. And then we mentioned them earlier, Atlanta is off to an 0-3 start as well.
Yeah, but Atlanta's a team that I'm the least concerned about out of this group. They've had a pretty tough schedule to start things off. They lost by 6 points to Gilmer, and then they ran into Gladewater in week 2, and then last week they lost to Pleasant Grove, the defending state championship, defending state champion, by only 2 touchdowns. So while an 0-3 start certainly looks bad, you got to consider who they were playing, and like you said with Rusk, Atlanta's been in these games. It's not like they've been getting blown out. They've got a great offense with Jawan King and Andrew Samples. Jawan King, the Rice commit at running back. It's their defense that's been sort of shooting them in the foot. They've been giving up 43 points per game. But I think as the season goes on, Atlanta's going to get into that district. They're one of those teams that we mentioned is dropping down from 4A. They're in a pretty tough district with Jefferson and Mount Vernon, but after that I think they can win probably most of the games in that district, and I don't think they're in danger of missing the playoffs or anything like that.
No, I don't either. It's just surprising to see Atlanta, a team that we had such high hopes for at the beginning of the year, when we still do.
Yeah.
At 0-3. So not kicking these teams off the boat at this point. They still have a great chance to make some noise this year, but just surprising to see them yet to record a win in 2018. Now on to week 4. It's a light schedule this week, as we mentioned. Some of the 8-team districts, they start a week from today, or a week from Friday. So those teams are on byes this week. But there are a handful of games worth keeping an eye on. The first one actually takes place outside the state of Texas, in eastern Louisiana. It's Longview at Ruston, Louisiana.
Yeah, Longview will make the trip out to Ruston. They've been rolling as we expected after that first game against Lufkin, really the only team that challenged them so far in those first 2 games. Their offense has been on fire. Haynes King has got nearly 700 passing yards already, and he's got 150 on the ground as well. So most of that came in one game against Marshall, but his connection with Camden Perry has been impressive throughout the season. Camden Perry is another guy who's up there in the leaders for receiving for East Texas. He's got like 300 yards receiving. And Longview's outscored their opponents in the last 2 games, John Tyler and Marshall, by 101 to 27, I believe.
Impressive.
So yeah, Longview has not been slowing down to start the season after that tough game with Lufkin. And I don't expect that to change here. I mean, just looking at what I've been able to find on Ruston, they're 2-1. They've got a couple guys who have over 200 yards rushing, but both those guys are pretty small. I think they're like 5'5", 140 pounds. I think Longview's got size on this team. I think I would expect Longview to come away with another win here.
Yeah, Ruston is a respected program in Louisiana, but not considered. Maybe in the top tier. So I agree with you. I think Longview goes over there, gets a win. I mean, it is going to be a challenge, going into state lines. I mean, the rules, they're not totally different from Texas, but they are different. So that could be a little bit of a pause, give them a little bit of a pause this week. But I would expect Longview to come away. I guess the signature game this weekend you'll be going to on Friday at Jeff Traylor Stadium. It's Carthage and Gilmer. Battle of a couple of top 10 teams in 4A.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite the hype it was last year when we had that Saturday game.
Yeah, 1 versus 2. No, it's not that.
It's 1 versus 8 this year, but Gilmer's going to want to get a victory, especially after coming off a loss to Paris last week.
Kind of a stunner.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. They lost 27 to 21. I don't think anybody really expected that.
They were down 27-7 at one point in that game too, so they had to come back to even make it close.
Yeah, I remember hearing in the press box that Gilmer's down 14-0 to Paris, and I was like, "What? That can't be right." But I mean, they'll bounce back. They're a good team. Carthage got a little test last week too against Marshall. Both these teams are perennial East Texas powers. They've got a combined like 9 state championships between them. So yeah, it should be a good game. I think the key in this one is going to be Gilmer, which is still rotating its 2 quarterbacks. You've got Mason Hurt and Cade Camp, both splitting time there, going up against the Carthage secondary and their defense. Carthage has been able to sort of get in the heads of opposing quarterbacks so far this year. They have 7 interceptions, I think. And last week, I mean, you saw J.J. Green last week. J.J. Green's a really good quarterback. He's got several D1 offers, and he's had a big game against Tyler Lee already. Threw
a couple of picks, and I tell you what, I came away very impressed with Carthage's secondary because they pretty much covered up those 3 D1 receivers from Marshall.
Yeah.
So I was impressed, and that's one thing that their head coach told me after the game, Scott Surratt. He said, if we can play coverage like that every week, it was one of those ... dots. He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew where he was going with it. And it was one of those fill in the blank, like, Yeah, okay, so maybe a third straight state title. Maybe that's where he was going. Maybe not. But I drew my own.
Want to say
yeah,
that.
I drew my own conclusion from his little ... What do you call those? Ellipses?
Yeah.
Ellipses. Yeah. Okay. It's been a while since I've taken any kind of grammar. Yeah. So Carthage Gilmer. It's got that name recognition.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to be paying attention to this across the state and in East Texas. I'll be one of them through Twitter. And then another game that I'm intrigued by, and we kind of mentioned it earlier in the show, Gladewater and Pleasant Grove.
Yeah.
This is a chance for Gladewater to really show if they're for real this year. I mean, they're 3-0. We both think that they're legit, especially in 3A, where they can, I think, make some noise in the playoffs and in that district. Pleasant Grove, they're 3-0 as well. They're picking right back up where they left off last year, state champs.
They've had some close games though so far.
Yeah, they have. The Atlanta game was a 2-score game. They beat Henderson by 9 points the week before.
I believe they had to come back in that Henderson game too.
Yeah, and I think they were down, or it was tied against Paris, which beat Gilmer last week. It was a close game until the second half where PG kind of pulled away. So I mean, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been as easy as it was for them last year through the first 3 games. This probably, I mean, if you just want to be honest about it, and this is probably their biggest test to date, this Gladewater team, and how they plan to D up guys like Eli Carter and Rashad Johnson and that powerful Gladewater rushing attack. And then Tristan Holmes, their quarterback, is actually played really well for them as well. So making plays both through the air and on the ground. So I'm looking forward to this game. I think it has the potential to be very good. I wouldn't be surprised if Gladewater hung around and made this game into the fourth quarter. I would still pick Pleasant Grove to win.
Yeah.
But I just want to see how Gladewater reacts on a stage like this against what will be their biggest test to date, and maybe the rest of the season, because I don't know if they're going to get a challenge like this from anybody at the 3A level. Maybe West for us, maybe not. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this one all shakes out on Friday. So those are 3 of the games that we're going to kind of really keep an eye on this week: Longview, Ruston, Carthage Gilmer, and of course Gladewater and Pleasant Grove. Before we get out of here, we want to give a special shout out to our offensive and defensive players of the week. First up on offense, we mentioned Alto earlier and their nice 3-0 start to the season. A lot of that has to do with their sophomore running back, Vidarius High. And wow, he just went off last week against New Diana. 41 carries. Nobody carries the ball that much anymore. 41 carries, 420 yards, and all 5 touchdowns in their 32-14 win over New Diana. He is our offensive player of the week. Congratulations, Vidarius High. And on defense?
Yeah, we've got Justin Edwards, the linebacker from Wills Point. He had forced 3 turnovers all on his own from Maybank last week in the 22-7 victory. 2 fumbles, an interception, and he also had 17 tackles. So a great performance for him and well-deserved. Yeah,
so congratulations to Vidarius High, Justin Edwards, our offensive and defensive players of the week. Well, that's going to do it. Be sure to follow us on Twitter to keep up with all the action in East Texas all season long. I'm at Clint Buckley. He's at Chandler Vessels. And, of course, you can follow along with the mothership at ETSN.fm. Also, the free ETSN mobile app is available now, and it's the best way to keep track of all of the games on Friday night with the best live scoreboard in East Texas. Download that app now. It's available right now at Google Play and the App Store. For Chandler Vessels, I'm Clint Buckley. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll come at you all again next week.